amalgamate them. The first question was around the rules-based order and basically, do they need updating? Well, it'd be really nice if people just sometimes stuck to the rules. That would be good, rather than worrying about updating them. I really do feel that, we're part of a small advanced economy. We're part of the multilateral approach to rules and the way in which we conduct ourselves and our areas, our territories, our economic zones. And I do believe that they are today the best that we have. And unless there's some particular reason that we should change them, that we should leave them as they are until we have something better. But the main thing is, if you've got the rules, follow them. You've asked there's a question about AUKUS and what could we bring. Well, it's Pillar 2, so it's the technology side. We have a significant technology sector and advanced aviation as well as space. In fact, recently when I was in the UK,
Morning. Що у нас там вдома?
Та ніч. Може, ви ж по гігаватам знаєте. Гігаватам,
Це ж не сьогодні було.
вчора.
Вчора. Morning. Good morning.
Good to see you.
How are you?
Excellent. Білий дом теж походу. Good to see you.
Hi. Так, ні, я б...
Вчора ввечері сидів багато. 6 вечора. А так. Well, good to see you. See you. All right.
Не дуже з вами цікаво.
Это про тебя, Ром.
А він ніяк не виходить, що він ніяк не захищає Дніпрогес. Тому що удари туди
Не було.
2 удари просто вони попали в річку, вони не попали в саме.
З Гером вчора спілкувався, він каже, що...
А ми спілкувалися тут.
Комерційні ЗМІ, щось дуже чутливе.
Ну, тут нічого такого немає, це російський удар.
Кременчугская також. Кременчугская, так слово. Погана ситуація не прикрита.
Morning.
Mr. President,
Morning, Secretary.
welcome to Singapore.
Thank
Great
you
to
so
see
much.
you again.
Good to see you too.
Thanks for meeting with me.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
John?
Okay, are we everything? Great, thank you.
we're well on a path towards developing that arrangement so that we can contribute. And we think it will be also beneficial to us. Not that I believe we have something strong to contribute, but we also have something strong to gain from that, because we all have a responsibility to be able to work together. And in particular, you talked about, do we know what's going on under the sea? Underwater surveillance in all regions of the world, certainly in the Pacific, which for us will be a significant priority. It's going to be important that we be able to work closely and collaboratively and to be able to exchange data and other information with our closest allies. And so I'm very confident that as our allies develop that framework for cooperation on the second pillar, Canada will be part of that. And with respect to the question around space, I think traditionally all of our militaries have looked at the three theaters of potential conflict: in maritime, air, and on land. But there are two other very significant emerging theaters of potential conflict for us. And one is in cyber. And I think that we haven't talked very much about that today, but it remains a very significant threat. Cyber attacks on all of our systems, attacks on our important institutions and critical infrastructure are a significant challenge to everyone in the region, and that is being seen more and more often as a real theater of conflict. And the second one is in space, and we have become very reliant, all of us, on space-based technologies, and the potential for conflict in that theater is also very high. And to that end, in my most recently defense policy update, I brought forward significant new investments. We're going to establish a space council. We are investing in our space industries. We work very closely. I'm very fortunate as being a member of the NORAD alliance with the United States. We're investing in, for example, over the horizon radars and over the polar radar systems to increase on domain awareness, but we recognize that we're going to have to be strong in space and in every place where our interests could be threatened.
Thank you very much. And Minister of Defense of Thailand wanted one more thought to add.
ผมตอบคำถามเพิ่มเติมอยู่
As on Myanmar situation and situation with Cambodia, as on Myanmar, as you have asked, how can we help resolving the issues of a large number of Myanmar persons fleeing unrest? There's a mechanism that we have with Myanmar authority. We have the General Border Committee, not only responsible on border issue and help each other fixing problem, including the scam. The General Border Committee meeting is also provide safe area, humanitarian areas along the border. We should allow them to stay on outside as needed. If it is necessary, we will try to provide more and more shelter for the large number of people that might come across on the basis of humanitarian. As on the situation with Cambodia, on the issue of overlapping, we have been successful, and I would like this to set an example. We also have the General Border Committee. This committee have openly discussed between each other, and we have a policy that we will change the area of awareness to become the area of peaceful coexistence, and we will help each other in demining, which is still the problem in the areas along the border, as well as promoting economy prosperity for the benefit of the people. There might be some emerging problems happen. The specific committee will be established to closely working together for peaceful resolution. This is quite a pleasant atmosphere, and pleasant communication between Cambodia and Thailand.
Perhaps for quick notes, we're going to close at 11 o'clock exactly. We've got clocks up here. You've got watches. So let's see if we can do that. Jonathan Miller first to Canada.
Thank you, Sir John. My question is for Minister Blair. Minister, you spoke about Canada's support for the rules-based order and our initiatives under our new Indo-Pacific strategy, and you also commented on your bilateral meeting with your Chinese counterpart and some of the positive outcomes of constructive dialogue. Yet the panel just before this, the Chinese Minister of Defense was vociferous in his criticism of Western support for the democratically elected government in Taiwan. Can you comment on Canada's view, how Canada views its partnership with Taiwan, and elaborate a little bit more about concerns about the Taiwan Strait situation? Thank you.
And from India, Darshana Bahua.
Thank you, Dr. Chipman. Two questions. First to Minister from Thailand. I'll keep it brief. I wanted to ask you about your views on if there's any serious consideration from the Thai government about developing the Kra Canal, which could significantly reduce travel time between Indian Ocean and African countries to Southeast Asia and beyond. You're one of the few countries with a coastline both on the Indian Ocean and South Pacific, and how you leverage the geography. My second question is to Minister from New Zealand. I had a different question for you, but you mentioned deep sea mining. I think Pacific is going to be a key theater for this. The ISS missed its deadline in deciding on the regulations and governance for it, and Pacific Islands are pretty divided on how to move forward on it. Could you share your views on commercial extraction of minerals from the seabed and its implications on geopolitics and security? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Virat Solanki.
Thank you, Sir John. My question is for Ministers Collins and Blair. We heard a lot about your Pacific Ocean strategy, but I'd be grateful to hear more about Canada and New Zealand's focus on the Indian Ocean. How much of a priority is the Indian Ocean for both of your countries, including relations with India? And could Canada and New Zealand seek to play a greater role in the sub-regional frameworks that Minister Sutin mentioned, such as the Indian Ocean Rim Association and Indian Ocean Naval Symposium? Thank you.
And from Indonesia, Andreas Aditya. Salim.
Excellencies, thank you for the opportunity. First of all, highly appreciate this panel because of its tremendous attention to the ocean and maritime. As an Indonesian, I feel really connected to it. My question is for Minister Collins and Minister Blair. What is your strategic view on Antarctica and Arctic with the current global dynamics? Will there be spillovers to the polar regions? What are the strategies to prevent or to deal with that? Or Antarctica and Arctic are not relevant at all? Thank you.
And final question, now Mumu Paul from Myanmar.
Hello. My question is from Ministers of Defense from Thailand. I understand you have answered a lot of many questions related to Myanmar border issue, and I also understand that our Myanmar, given that situation in Myanmar, places a significant burden not only on the government of Thailand but also the citizens of Thailand as well. So I would like to ask, and my questions additionally, that considering that some area are controlling by the other ethnic groups in there, how they can collaborate with the Thailand to support people in the safe place during a crisis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Minister of Defense of Thailand, if you could take 1.5 minutes for that specific question, and you each get about to close at 11. Sir.
ครับเรื่องขอกราบก่อนเราได้
As issue of Grand Canal that you have asked the question, Grand Canal might have quite a major affected. Therefore, we have a new project, the Land Bridge project, which we are currently conducting on feasibility study and planning of the Land Bridge project. As on the minority situation of Myanmar. We consider this as internal affairs, but we do aware that the situation might be prolonged due to the complex of situation. But we have a very positive prospect that there might be a negotiation for peaceful dialogue. There is a proposal to have the general election. We do hope and we pray the general election proposal will be the best solution and will de-escalate the tension. It is my fervent hope.
So deep sea mining. I'm just going to say basically is that so much conflict is about resources. So the potential for conflict in areas where there are enormous mineral wealth that is coming out of the seabed, particularly in the nodules around volcanoes, does actually create an issue, which, as I say before, basically, if we consider the Pacific, it's full of large ocean countries. And it is very important from my point of view that any wealth coming from that sort of activity needs to make its way to the countries who actually, in whose economic zone it is. So I think that would be very important if there were to be any more of it. The Indian Ocean, obviously very relevant. It's, and India in particular, we're trying to, and seeking to renew and to grow and enhance our relationship with India. I mean, India is the world's largest democracy, incredibly vibrant and interesting part of the world, also geopolitically very interesting with its placement in the world. And I think we have plenty that we share with India, including rule of law, including Westminster system, and I think, you know, we've got a lot that we want to do with India. Antarctica, can I just say, you know, some of the activity that's being talked about is going on might be some concern to us. New Zealand's been a long time player in Antarctica. We have very good scientific work going on there at Scott Base. It is very important to us that Antarctica does not become an area of mineral and wealth grab, that it is actually the Antarctic space that we've always known it to be. And we're very, very aware that some countries might be thinking about getting more active and not in necessarily just a scientific way.
Thank you, Bill.
And John, first of all, the conversation I had with Minister Dongjun, I tried to make it very clear that Canada embraced the One China policy, but our strong interest was stability and peace in the region. We talked about some of the passages that Canada has made through the Taiwan Strait, and our intent, made it clear, was defending the principle of freedom of navigation in international seas. And I also expressed concern that China's action in the immediate aftermath of Taiwan's democratic elections were, in my opinion, unnecessarily provocative. Now, please be assured that Minister Dongjun reply to me was as frank as it was this morning. As well, one of the things I can also share with you is that the Arctic is actually, our Arctic is melting at 4 times the global rate, and therefore is becoming far more accessible. What we've also seen is the aggressive and assertive actions of certain adversarial nations that are challenging our sovereignty in the region, and it is one of the things that strongly motivates us to increase our presence there, our strength, in order to deter those types of actions. And finally, let me also reiterate, India is very important to Canada. It's very important to the world, and we are actively working to engage more appropriately with the Modi government. There have been some challenges for Canada in the most recent past, but we believe that the appropriate resolution of that is through dialogue and through proper engagement. It's a very important trading partner to us. It's an important emerging economy, and we believe that it's a non-aligned nation, and we have to appeal to its interests.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, I think we've had an absolutely wonderful panel, and the IISS is committed to doing more work on all the subjects that have been addressed here. Please thank my panel, and return at 11:30 exactly.
7th plenary session. Since Friday, we have been engaged in defense diplomatic exchanges, and we will now turn to the issue of reimagining solutions for global peace and regional stability. We will begin with regional stability, and it is my pleasure to welcome to the stage two defense ministers from Malaysia, Minister Mohammed Khaled Nordin, and of course from our host nation, Dr. Ong, the Defense Minister of Singapore. They will speak and offer their thoughts on how mechanisms and models for cooperative security in the Asia-Pacific could be developed and serve the purpose of regional stability. After their speeches, we will take questions and the ministers will offer their answers to these questions, and then we will then at a certain point welcome President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine to the stage, who will speak on global peace. The President will then, after his speech, take a number of questions, and following that, we will conclude the ISS Shangri-La Dialogue 2024. So that is the sequence for this 7th plenary, and may I now invite the Minister from Malaysia to take the floor and this podium. Minister, over to you. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to be invited to this prestigious 21st edition of the Shangri-La Dialogue. It is a privilege to share the stage with my counterpart, Dr. Ng. And thank you, IISS, for inviting me to this premier global dialogue. Many speakers emphasize on the need for dialogue. We are totally agreeable because through constant dialogue, we hope that binary views and zero-sum thinking will be mitigated to ensure peace and stability. Accordingly, to nurture a norm of listening to others rather than living in a bubble and seeing things in black and white. Ladies and gentlemen, reimagining solutions for regional stability, as I've been asked to elaborate, requires careful thought because remedies are not without perils. Being at the last plenary of the event, I try not to be repetitive. All esteemed speakers have tremendously debated our current regional and geopolitical climate. To craft solution is to grasp the predicament, and today's predicaments are persistently unpredictable. The uncertainties were caused by COVID-19, the Russia-Ukraine war, and Gaza atrocities. You name it, because the list will keep going. As President Zelensky will be with us here later, I wish to express Malaysia's hope that the conflict will not further escalate and that peace will prevail in that region. Similarly, we must equally recognize the importance of working towards peace in Palestine. This conflict has challenged our very conscience as human beings and tested our courage to confront and condemn acts of genocide. Allow me to reiterate Malaysia's view and position on the matter. As a country that has been pushing for an immediate and permanent ceasefire, we certainly welcome and support any proposal that will help achieve the immediate and permanent ceasefire. We note the recently announced three-stage proposal by President Biden. We believe that the Palestinians must be given the full right to self-determination and dignity. the right to national independence and sovereignty, and the right to freedom of movement. In this regard, I applaud the commitment expressed by Bapak Prabowo in his special address yesterday that the active and effective pursuit of a lasting solution must be supported by the whole international community. I wish to also echo the view taken by the Australian Deputy Prime Minister during the third plenary session that Israel must comply with the binding orders of the International Court of Justice. In line with the obligation under the Genocide Convention, Israel must immediately halt its military offensive and any other action in Rafah. Ladies and gentlemen, let me continue on the challenges towards regional security. In the context of emerging technology, threats are more dynamic on its weaponization ability. The systematic usage of unmanned aerial vehicles has been abused to further devastate the war. Meanwhile, cybersecurity incidents take a 600% increase in cybercrime since the beginning of the pandemic and recorded a 350% increase of ransomware attacks around the world. The next alarming trends are global warming and rising sea levels. It threatens our overall security in the long run by depleting our resources and disastrous natural catastrophe. Near our homes, the tension in the South China Sea and the Taiwan Straits potentially trigger armed conflicts. Ladies and gentlemen, looking at the multitude of hurdles, how can we avert the obstacles for long-term stability? Allow me to reimagine the solution for a better future. It involves constructive, comprehensive, and complementary outlooks. The first outlook is for a constructive dialogue among countries near and far, big and small, to take place regularly. Indeed, this step is critical to bridging the diverging interests, finding mutual grounds, and seeking favorable solutions. In a transparent manner, constructive interactions breed confidence and trust. Leveraging informal and formal avenues will propel success. In 2025, when Malaysia chairs ASEAN, we will continue the tradition of being in the regional driving seat and preserving our centrality. The centrality must be earned and respected by providing space and liberty to our member states and our dialogue partners to communicate. The convening power of ASEAN will provide an indispensable point for constructive dialogue. We aim to provide a fertile ground for laser-focused solution in 2025, particularly on the pressing issues and ongoing negotiations concerning our region. The ADMM and ADMM+, along with the expert working groups, will continue their prominent role in ensuring constructive dialogue in defense cooperation. The second outlook is the robust initiation of comprehensive cooperation across domains. Marine pollution, natural disasters, maritime piracy, and cyber threats should be among our top agenda. While we bolster the existing ASEAN-led mechanism, looking beyond the current domains is pivotal to complement and add value to our existing architecture. It is timely for us to depart from orthodox views on security by expanding our horizon on wider themes. This includes defense, education and leadership, military and public health and welfare, cyber and digital space, environmental technology and food security, as well as disaster risk management, which are all embedded in converging interests. Globalization has immersed countries in an intricate web of multi-layered domains and competition. Suffice to say that while countries are normally more rational and mature in adopting a neutral paradigm, they will also be more open to exploring collaborations in other domains. Finally, the cooperation established should be complementary in nature through numerous layers and platforms. Oftentimes, security architecture stems exclusivity that impedes greater cooperation. Nowadays, like-minded countries will form exclusive pacts to pursue similar interests. However, we are hoping that such a partnership will not harbor further fragmentation. Divisive moves inflict a decisive blow to regional stability. ASEAN will not merely enable node-based regional multilateral platforms, but also need-based minilateral and niche-based bilateral channels. Cooperation over competition is a mantra for stability, at least for now. Although competition will harness formidable results, we have seen excessive competition morph into a detrimental rivalry. The security pact that took place in the Asia-Pacific region should complement each other's capacity and capability. This region should prepare itself to maneuver the existing and emerging security partnership that gradually shape our regional dynamics. In the current climate, significant collaboration with multiple blocs supersedes potential anxiety. Premise on the importance of credible partnership at the bloc-to-bloc level for ASEAN, I will argue that collaboration between ASEAN and other collaboration pacts or regional blocs instead of with individual countries is worth exploring. Such arrangement must be articulated with the emphasis to reap benefits from collaboration between pact to pact. Ladies and gentlemen, the 3C approach that I have elaborated on is essential to sustainable cooperation between ASEAN, our dialogue partners, and other like-minded countries, and how we ensure regional stability. It is important to note that ASEAN has thrived based on our neutrality, and we will continue to be neutral. We should not be forced to take sides, and we will not take sides. Regardless, Malaysia's position on any act to escalate conflicts in the region remains unchanged. Now, as we mature together, navigating the uncertainty is a routine that we cannot avoid. Nevertheless, we do admit that there is no quick or easy way to address uncertainties, and for that, we should not take the one-size-fits-all approach. Thus, again, I reiterate that being non-aligned is the best way possible while expanding multi-layered cooperation even with conflicting parties. Ladies and gentlemen, these past few days have been a contemplating period for me on how to frame holistic security outlooks. It is joyful listening to esteemed speakers, interacting with fellow friends, and having a thought-provoking audience. Hope to see everyone again next year, and in the name of inclusion and constructive dialogue, if I may, I suggest we also invite a representative from the Palestine. Thank you very much.
Minister, thank you very much for those remarks. I think the audience will appreciate you outlining your thoughts as in 2025 incoming ASEAN chair. I think it is very important for this audience to hear how you might approach that period and the priorities that will drive your approach. Thank you very much for this. May I now invite Minister Ong to take the floor, please. Thank you.
Let me, on behalf of this host, or Senior Minister Teo Chee Hean and my other colleagues, Senior Minister Teo, Senior Minister of State Heng Chee Hao, Senior Minister of State Zaki Mohammed, welcome all of you attending this 21st edition of the Shangri-La edition. With your strong and consistent support each year, the Shangri-La Dialogue has grown and now receives more than 40 ministerial representatives and some 570 delegates from more than 40 countries present today. 21st, as is customary, is when you become of adult age. So has the Shangri-La Dialogue at 21 shown promise as an adult? I think so. I think it is matured. I think it's broadened. I think it's a bit more realistic, less idealistic, but more practical. And if it is any success, it is because of your presence and your willingness to come here and engage and sometimes do verbal combat and other times just to listen. And I want to thank the board and the members of IISS for starting this quest. 21 years ago, the idea of a security conference in Asia was started on a wing of a prayer and a hope that dialogue was useful for the defense security arena. My main message over the past few years has been consistent, and this year will be no different. We must avoid a physical conflict in Asia, because we can all agree that neither Asia nor the world can withstand the third geopolitical shock. The war in Ukraine is now into its third year following Russia's invasion. NATO countries showed great determination in this year's Munich Security Conference to support Ukraine to defend their sovereignty and to do more, fully cognizant of the implications of the upcoming US presidential elections. Nevertheless, as the conflict drags out, so too the uncertainty of continuing support and achievable outcomes. Meanwhile, in the Middle East, what began as a terrorist attack by Hamas on Israel communities now threatens to draw in other powers to pose a wider contagion. If there is any salient epiphany against this backdrop, it must be not here in Asia. Indeed, this was a cri de coeur when President Zelensky spoke to us 2 years ago here at the Shangri-La Dialogue. I will never forget that. It was still vividly etched in my mental imageries. We were just coming out of COVID. You remember seeing President Zelensky. We didn't know where he was. We knew he was under threat. His country was under threat. And he spoke to us. And he said, I quote, "We must take the preemptive way, not the one that comes after the war has started, after hostilities have broken out, after we have hundreds of thousands of casualties and even millions of casualties, unquote. And I'm glad that he's here today to be able to add to that, and I'm sure that all of us are looking forward and honored by his presence later on. But what ought and can we do? What agency should be brought to bear? And that's the imaginative title of this session, Reimagining Solutions. Bastian, I congratulate you on these catchy headlines, but truth be told, I had some problem trying to live up to this. As you know, I'm by training a surgeon. And when I cut open bodies, I see the same parts, each and every time. And I put it to you that if you want to find a surgeon, you're not necessarily looking for the most imaginative one. You want to make sure that when he takes you apart, he puts you back in the right way. Snip by snip, cut by cut, stitch by stitch. So I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint in terms of what we ought to do. And it's going to be hard work and the humdrum. Most of us here would agree that the US and China are dominant protagonists to decide Asia's fate for this decade and beyond. What their leaders say count a great deal. Thankfully, both have disavowed physical conflict between their two countries. US President Joe Biden has said that the US seeks to, quote, responsibly manage the competition between them so that it does not tip into conflict. And Secretary Austin said the same thing. We seek competition, not confrontation. And war with China is neither imminent nor unavoidable. Very reassuring words. The China President Xi Jinping has stated that China has, quote, no intention to challenge the US or to unseat it. And we will not fight a cold war or a hot war with anyone. Despite these reassuring affirmations, temperatures did go up when President Biden said that it was up to Taiwan to make up their mind on independence. And when asked, affirmed that the US would defend Taiwan in the event of a Chinese invasion. So too, the temperatures go up when President Xi said, quote, the East is rising while the West is declining, and that China would not give up even 1 inch, quote unquote, of territory in the South China Sea and would resolve the Taiwan question. The meeting between the two leaders in San Francisco proved a positive step to calm troubled waters, if not build back relations. After that meeting, when asked about the Taiwan elections early this year, President Biden said, we, meaning the US, do not support Taiwanese independence. President Xi replied that while US-China relations could not go back to the old days, it could, quote unquote, embrace a brighter future. With the upcoming US presidential elections this year, so it was a good meeting between the two, and we would have wished for more. But with the upcoming US presidential elections this year, another meeting between the two leaders is unlikely. Expectations of increasing engagements are low on both sides. Notwithstanding this political ennui, more dialogue and positive initiatives are sorely needed. A de facto trade war has ensued between the US and China. The US has articulated its small yard high fence approach to trade on grounds of national security. Over time, the yard has grown larger, despite US political leaders' assertions that they do not want decoupling. However, it's unclear how these sensitive areas can be effectively ring-fenced without significant disruption to global trade. Then there is the question of if and how China might retaliate to this trade policy. It has already begun. China, as a producer of 60% of rare earths, globally banned the export of technology to make rare earth magnets, essential for many modern electronics. In this flux, it is important for senior officials to step up their engagements. In 2009, both sides started the US-China Strategic and Economic Dialogue, later replaced by the Comprehensive Economic Dialogue, to deal with exactly these issues, thorny trade issues. These talks were effectively suspended in 2018 and have not resumed. I started with trade relations because trade and security are faces of the same coin of codependency and preemption. For security, there are some realities we must face. First, Taiwan is a red line. Against the backdrop of Russia's attack on Ukraine, it's tempting but misplaced to conflate that with Taiwan and China. Taiwan is not Ukraine, and neither is China Russia. In 2020, China accounted for 1.9% of global exports. China, in comparison, accounts for over 14%. Ukraine is a member of the United Nations. Taiwan is not. Many of our country's diplomatic positions also recognize the One China policy. Taiwan is a complex issue, and the status quo of no independence and no forced reunification appears to be the best compromise for all parties involved, without precipitous actions from any party. In the South China Sea, there will also be no quick resolution of competing claims or positions. What is therefore needed are practical measures on the ground to prevent conflicts and de-escalate. There needs to be more dialogue and physical engagements between the US military and the PLA personnel. The last visit of a senior-ranking PLA official to the US was in 2015 by then CMC Vice Chairman General Fan Chanlong, and for the US, then the Chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Joe Dunford, visited Beijing in 2017. I suggest that it will be positive if these mill-to-mill exchanges resume. On fishing, mutual agreements can prevent disputes. Learning from the 2013 incident where a Taiwan fisherman was killed by Philippines Coast Guard personnel, Taiwan and Philippines inked an agreement concerning the facilitation and cooperation on law enforcement in fisheries matters in 2015. So fishermen have been killed in fishing disputes, and it was not casus belli. And indeed, Taiwan and Philippines came to an agreement in 2015, and since then, no similar incidents have taken. Agreements for hydrocarbons and other resources are more complex, but not impossible. Malaysia and Thailand have carved out a joint development area for exploration and exploitation of non-living natural resources, including hydrocarbons, within their overlapping continental shelves. To prevent physical conflicts in an increasingly contested South China Sea, protocols like the Code for Unexpected Encounters at Sea and guidelines for air military encounters reduce the risks of miscalculation and escalation in maritime and air domains. But sorely missing are paramilitary and law enforcement agencies' inclusion into these frameworks, and they need to be brought into them. We want to avoid a repeat of past incidents, such as the 2001 Hainan incident, of a collision between the US Navy's EP-3 and the PLA's Navy's fighter jet, or the more recent collisions between the Chinese and Philippines Coast Guard vessels over the second Thomas Shoal. Some have argued that the events in Asia are but an extension of the previous Cold War, now fought out between the US and China. Despite this strategic rivalry, the US and China are both integral to the functioning of a globally connected economy, upon which all our well-being depends. In 2022, the US accounted for 25% of global GDP, and China accounted for 18%, slightly larger than that of the entire EU. Last year, China was also the top trading partner of more than 120 countries, and ASEAN as a whole. There is another stark difference. I doubt if there will be an equivalent of a glasnost or perestroika moment for China. The legitimacy of the Communist Party of China under President Xi is well entrenched among Chinese citizens who have witnessed considerable progress over the past 3 decades of their country and their lives under his leadership. In this region, ASEAN plays a key role by upholding itself and the partners to the ASEAN Charter. In defense, the Asian Defense Ministers Meeting expert working groups exist to promote military-to-military cooperation for the 18 nations. To date, more than 20 large-scale exercises have been conducted, and it is noteworthy that this is the only platform where both US and China militaries participate. The ADMM welcomes the participation of Canada, France, and the United Kingdom as observers to the expert working groups last year. Germany and the EU have also applied to be observers, and Singapore strongly supports as a positive sign of their involvement within the ADMM plus structure. So thank you all for all your support and contributions for the SLD once again. I thank also the many people who have worked tirelessly behind the scenes to allow us to focus on these important conversations. Staff of the Shangri-La Hotel, the home team, our police and civil defense force. I've received many compliments about their service. And they do it because it's their jobs, but I think there is something deeper. As is customary after each of when Shangri-La Dialogue has ended, I meet the hotel staff who have served you with, I think, with very good service, just to thank them. And some staff have been here since the inception of the SLD. And when you talk to them, they have come to believe that they are part of this Shangri-La dream, this quest for peace. And they feel that they are doing their part in looking for regional peace, if not beyond. So thank you, and I thank you on behalf of them. I will thank them on behalf of you, and I thank you all, and I hope for all of you to have a safe journey back home. Thank you.
Minister, thank you very much for those remarks, and I think you've wielded your scalpel with great precision by pointing us to the fact that prevention often is the cure before the surgeon needs to get on the case, and of course that many of the practical efforts that you have called for might be best aimed in that direction. So I think that's a very useful reminder to our audience of that priority. Okay, we've got a growing list of questions, so I will take a first group, and then we will have a round of answers, and if we have time, we will take another one. And it's my pleasure to first ask a veteran of the Shangri-La Dialogue and the former executive director of ISS Asia, Tim Huxley.
Thank you very much, Bastian. My question is for Malaysia's Defence Minister. Datuk Seri Khaled, my question concerns emerging security challenges on the island of Borneo, where sovereignty is divided between Malaysia, Indonesia, and Brunei Darussalam. What do you see as the particular challenges to the security of the Malaysian states of Sabah and Sarawak? How does your ministry and the Malaysian Armed Forces view the implications in particular of Indonesia's long-term strategic program to move its capital city to Nusantara in East Kalimantan? Indonesia's political and military center of gravity is going to shift in the coming years, and I think there is a question about how Malaysia will adjust to that new reality. Thank you very much.
Let me collect a few questions, and then we can answer them in a group, so we get a few more views in. May I next call on from Thailand, Tida Yang-Sharon.
Thank you. My question is to both ministers. How can we empower our region to contribute to global peace and stability when at times there isn't any among ourselves? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to next call on Aaron Connolly from the US. Aaron.
Thank you, Bastian. Datuk Seri, I wanted to ask you about your comments about like-minded countries forming small blocs, which you seem to regard as a sign of fragmentation and divisive moves that could be a decisive blow to regional stability. I wonder, is there more that ASEAN can do to fill the gaps in the regional architecture that seem to lead countries to believe that they need these small blocs? Something that Malaysia in particular can do to raise the level of ambition in the ADMM or in ASEAN more generally, particularly given your role as the permanent shepherd for ASEAN's post-2025 vision. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aaron. And we'll take from Myanmar, Nyanyan Chantong.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor, and thank you, Minister, for your excellent remark. My question is to both Minister about the defense industry cooperation among the ASEAN member states. So it is clear that there is various factors driving this necessity, and also there is also some call for collaborative effort that resonate very strongly. However, the internal instability within member states, especially the ongoing crisis in Myanmar, adds another layer of complexity, and that's going the urgency of fostering robust cooperation. So in this context, how do you navigate or propose navigating the intricate interplay between external geopolitical dynamic, internal conflict within member states, and the imperative of strengthening defense industry cooperation to safeguard the regional security and autonomy? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll take two more in this round. From Vietnam, Big Tran, please.
Thank you, Dr. Sugarrich. So my question is to both ministers, because, you know, the United States is committed to enhance cooperation with ASEAN through the second ASEAN-US maritime exercise. So the first one was in 2019, and Singapore hosted a watch center for the exercise then. And this next year, 2025, Malaysia will be the chair of ASEAN. So I would like to ask both of you about your thoughts on how this kind of exercise can contribute to regional maritime security. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And last in this round, but we'll try to come back to get a few more in from Australia. Rory Metcalfe, please.
Thank you. My questions to both ministers. You and other speakers at this dialogue, including the Chinese Defence Minister, have emphasised the overriding importance of stability to ensure the prosperity and development of all countries in the region. The use of force against Taiwan would really shatter this prosperity with devastating humanitarian and economic consequences for all of Southeast Asia and the wider region and the world. Can you please share with us how you and other leaders within ASEAN convey that concern to China?
Thank you very much. Let us tackle those. And I propose, Minister from Malaysia, we'll start with you. Mohammed Khaled, please, if you can take on a few of those.
Thank you. Thank you for all the questions. I try to answer it generally together, and maybe those that I'm not, that I don't answer, I will leave it to my my more senior colleague.
Senior colleague.
Okay. But this one I think I have to answer. On the move by Indonesia, their capital, to Nusantara. I think yesterday when Pak Prabowo spoke, he alluded to the fact that whatever issues all this while that Indonesia has with Malaysia or even with Singapore, we are able to resolve it amicably. And we see that we have matured in our relationship, and whatever issues or challenges that we will face in future, we believe that we can overcome it. But the move by Indonesia, their capital, to Nusantara, to Malaysia, is actually an opportunity, because it will allow both countries to benefit from the effect of the focus and development of that particular area. And at the same time, for Malaysia, for whatever that we will focus on our defense, defense will be a process that will be done naturally, not towards looking into the development of Nusantara or any other place. So we do not see that as a threat. I believe that when Indonesia has Nusantara as the capital, they will develop it, they will let it grow, and I believe surely they will not see that the capital pose any threat to anybody, especially including to Malaysia. So to us, it is more an opportunity. I'm sure there will be spin-off from the relocation of the capital to Nusantara, and with the close relationship, not only bilaterally, but also through ASEAN, we will ensure that we will work more closely, or if there is any issues or challenges, we will have open dialogue with them. And this is what this Shangri-La dialogue is all about. I think everybody was speaking about dialogue, and most of the questions asked by the participant here today, most of the answer will be to have dialogue. It also includes on the question of Myanmar. I think we accept the fact that it is very, very complex for Myanmar, for us to find a solution. Surely one of the most important factors is we want to see, firstly, there are common grounds among all those in Myanmar, which is something that we are still not able to see. Most of the parties in Myanmar, if they have no common ground, it will be very difficult for ASEAN or for anyone else to find a solution. But the point is, I think there is no other solution than having dialogue. So that also includes for other pacts or groups by other countries, even if there are such grouping. For ASEAN, like I have mentioned, that the third approach that we need to look at is on the complementary approach, where we should be open to have dialogue with such group, so that they can be roped into whatever that ASEAN aspire and to support, and to ensure that they contribute towards the ASEAN's principle. So, and for exercises, I think that is one way in which we establish our relationship, we strengthen our partnership, and that will continue as far as ASEAN is concerned. I leave it now to...
Thank you, Minister.
I think there were two broad topics that I'll address, one on ASEAN and second one on Taiwan. Question from Mr. Metcalf, what ASEAN does to give its views about Taiwan. On ASEAN, it's a good question. What is ASEAN, if you think about it? And we talk about ASEAN centrality. Questions have been asked about what ASEAN can do. And I suppose the starting point is what agency and what creature is this? Is ASEAN centrality by virtue of its size? It's not. Combined, I think we are a large population because we have some large nations like Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, but I think our combined GDP is, I think it's a guess about 3 trillion. Combined military expenditure, I don't think is comparable to any of large middle powers. So it's not by economic heft, neither military might. So what basis is ASEAN centrality? And that's an interesting question. I've thought about this, and I thought the best analogy is ASEAN is like the Hobbit in Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. One ring to control them all, because the others weren't trusted to hold that ring and shouldn't have held the ring. And I think ASEAN needs to continue to play that role. And it can gain credibility, I think, by how it behaves. And my distinguished colleague, Datuk Seri Khaled, has given some examples. And it may be surprising to you that hobbits also quarrel among themselves. But I'm quite proud to say that on record that we have settled many of the disputes peacefully. Let me cite some. Of course, between Malaysia and Indonesia, Sipadan, Litigan, for those of you who know these places. Also, between Indonesia, in 2022, Indonesian Foreign Minister Retno stated that Indonesia had engaged in no less than 17 rounds of maritime boundary negotiations with Philippines, Malaysia, Palau, and Vietnam. And in 2022, they welcomed news that Indonesia and Vietnam had agreed to the EE zone boundaries in the waters surrounding the Natuna Islands after 12 years of bilateral negotiations. Yesterday at the ministerial lunch, we also cited what Australia's agreement with Timor-Leste is. So I think ASEAN and wider Asia, I think if we continue this example of settlement by peaceful disputes, I think ASEAN gains credibility. ASEAN, I think the ADMM that I cited in my speech is useful. We have the expert working groups, and this also addresses the issue of military operations. It is the only security architecture that has 18 militaries participating. There's a special feature of it called the expert working groups where the militaries exercise. And when Brunei hosted it, and this was some time ago, I admit, this was the only 18-nation military exercise. They sailed from Brunei to Singapore. And this was the only exercise that all nations had cross-deck. In other words, you had Japanese troops, I think landing on Chinese ships landing on US ships. We're not so bold, maybe not so unrealistic to hope that that will happen soon, but certainly it's an aspiration to resume that kind of exercise, and we'll continue to do it. And as I said, a proof of success is that other plus countries, beyond the plus countries, they have also applied to join this observer. I mentioned France, Canada, United Kingdom, which are already in, and the EU and Germany have also applied. Let me deal with what we advise China about Taiwan. China doesn't need any advice about Taiwan from ASEAN. You just heard before this session, Minister Tong Chin, he would have gone on for half an hour about Taiwan if you let him, so they don't need any advice. But let me give an anecdote. Earlier this year in Munich Security Conference, their Foreign Minister Wang Yi was speaking as a plenary speaker on his own. And I think in the Munich Security Conference, they are milder and quite kind in their question time. And the first question came out after his session is, Foreign Minister Wang Yi, will China invade Taiwan? And his answer was instructive. He's an accomplished diplomat, so he was unfazed. And he said, in the Chinese constitution, there are 3 reasons for justified force against Taiwan. So all ears pricked up. First, if Taiwan declares independence. Second, if another country fights on behalf for Taiwan's independence. And third, if all peaceful means have been exhausted. I suggest that's a very useful framework for us to keep the peace.
Thank you very much. I'll take a few more questions and we'll have a second round of responses to these. And I will start this round with Akita Hiroyuki from Japan, please.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask a question that we haven't discussed so much in this room. That is about the possible second-term Trump administration in the US. So I'm sure that your mission is to prepare for the unpredictable future. So my question is, how do you predict the most nightmare scenario that maybe there will be an optimistic scenario, but maybe for the sake of time, I'd like to ask, what is the most nightmare scenario that you are preparing for? And then secondly, what is the specific countermeasures for you to adapt or mitigate such a risk? Thank you.
For the record, you did not reveal what your personal nightmare scenario is, so that gives us more than one direction. Can I now call...
And who the question was directed at?
I'll ask next, please, from Brunei, Hafiz Hashim.
Hi, thank you, ministers. This question goes to both ministers. Yeah. So, how do you perceive that ASEAN can approach to these new emerging security threats, such as those human securities, right? Given that there are slight uncertainties surrounding ASEAN's centrality on how each members understand what security means. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And can I please have Peter Lee from Korea?
Thank you. My question is to both ministers. So a few days ago, the governments of Australia, Korea, Japan, the United States and others released a joint statement condemning North Korean transfers of munitions and missiles to Russia for use in Ukraine. No government of Southeast Asia signed that. So I'm curious how your countries view this issue and what position you want to take. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally in this round, from the UK, Viraj Solanki.
Thank you, Bastian. Just building on Dr. Ng's last point, do you think that the current regional dialogue mechanisms, both multilaterally such as ASEAN or ADMM Plus, or minilateral groupings are effective enough to address the growing number of geopolitical challenges that we're currently facing, or do you think that changes could be made to make these groupings more effective in addressing these issues? Thank you.
Thank you very much. If we have time to take a few more, there are a few more on our list, so we have, I might be able to come back to you, but if I may turn to the ministers again for responses to those 4 points. Minister Ong, can I start this round with you? Is that okay?
Let me, it's very unusual no country predicates its foreign policy on a certain political outcome of another, right? I mean, that we're all adults and you have to work with administrations. And on record, and I agree with Bastian, I don't know what nightmarish scenario you're talking about. Maybe you might reveal to us what your nightmares are. But when President Trump was president, we extended our MOU with the US with Prime Minister Lee in New York, which gave us an extension to the US for, I think, another 15 or 20 years to rotate through our bases and Changi Naval Base and air bases. So we'll work with any administration of any country if we can find common ground. And, but I'll try to understand what you mean and then reply with an anecdote. Boris Pistorius, the German defense minister, was asked this same question, but not in the nightmarish terms that you use, at the Munich Security Dialogue. And the question posed to him was, how should Europe prepare for if President Trump was elected? And his answer was a good one. He said, Europe's preparations cannot depend on the outcome of the US elections. We have to be prepared on ourselves, Europe, to defend itself. So I would say, yes, countries will have to, based on their own interests, and we'll work with either administration. For newly emerging threats, I think we are engaged with some of these. We are involved with the Netherlands and Korea in trying to push their initiatives toward AI, and I applaud what Netherlands and Korea are doing, trying to gain a leadership role, a global role, to try to have a framework in which AI is being used for military use. I mean, that's just an example. Mr. Zelensky asked, is the present architecture adequate? I think it is. If you compare it, for example, with NATO, you know, all of us are excited about when President Zelensky will come. But if you look at NATO, it was in a historic time against a common threat. ASEAN didn't have that. And I would congratulate the originators who started that, and Senior Minister Teo was involved in the Singapore side in constructing it to include 18 nations. So I think it is it's adequate. If more countries want to join, I think we will consider it, observers first, but the answer is yes. Dato'. Please.
Thank you. I think the question on Trump and all this, I think I would like to answer it by saying that whatever it is, if you can see that ASEAN has made an impact, whatever the situation, whatever the challenges, I believe that ASEAN will continue to be there, and we will, all the countries within this region, through ASEAN, we will work collectively with or without Trump. And also on the issues of the emerging threats and all those things, imagine if there is no ASEAN. So I believe that most of the answer is that we are fortunate. We have ASEAN, and because of ASEAN, we are also fortunate that this region, we are still peaceful, stable. There is no conflict within this region. So actually, we have to see and ensure that ASEAN is still present, is strong, stable, and members are cohesive among each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for those questions and the answers that have been provided on these important themes of regional stability. Ukraine is in a battle for national survival, defending itself against Russian aggression. Upon arriving in Singapore yesterday, President Zelensky said, and I might quote him here, "Global security is impossible when the world's largest country disregards recognized borders, international law, and the UN Charter, resorts to hunger, darkness, and nuclear blackmail. Restoring just peace for Ukraine and ensuring global food and nuclear security will be the aim of the Global Peace Summit in Switzerland, and this is why the Asia-Pacific voice must be heard there." This is what he said, and we are delighted that President Zelensky has chosen to address the ISS Shangri-La dialogue. President Zelensky. Mr. President, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gigri, dear Ministers of Defense, ladies and gentlemen, dear journalists. I'm pleased to address you here today at IISS Shangri-La Dialogue. For many years, in such summits, including here in Singapore, people discussed the importance of diplomacy. And it's often said that brutal force should not dominate the world. Similarly, attempts by various power centers to impose something on other nations against their will in politics, economy, or security should not dominate either. Diplomacy should be those caring and strong hands that prevent international disputes from turning into fights, restraining the most aggressive parties. This is how diplomacy often worked in the past. But frankly, the last few decades have not been a time for diplomacy. We have all felt this, and each region, sometimes even countries, has its own experience of how diplomacy has degraded, leaving only disappointment behind. In the 1990s, Ukraine suffered one of the greatest deceptions in the modern history when the security assurances from nuclear powers in exchange for the nuclear arsenal located in Ukraine did not translate into real security. It was exactly 28 years ago these days when Ukraine handed over its last nuclear warheads to Russia. In line with a multilateral international agreement, and it is Russia that has tried to erase Ukraine from the political map of the world. In the 2000s, Ukraine faced the first obvious violations by Russia on our territory and sovereignty, revealing that there was no element of the world's security architecture capable of restraining Russia and forcing it to stick to the principles and purposes of UN Charter. So Putin believes he is allowed to do anything. By the mid-2010s, Russia brought a war to our land, a war that we in Ukraine never wanted, did not provoke, and which expanded into the most treacherous invasion Europe has experienced since World War II. All of this was a series of diplomatic failures and constant attempts to keep the world divided into spheres of influence, which disrupts nations' lives and corrupts global powers. As a result, war. When unity was needed, the world was divided. When bold decisions were required, many were content with the status quo. And when preventive action was necessary to avoid the worst, the aggressor was somehow given time to prepare. We remember how Moscow tempted the world with the talks, all of them which resulted in hollow wars or unacceptable ultimatums. Thus, we found ourselves in a war that now affects everyone in the world and spreads a globally dangerous cult of violence instead of trust in international law, trust that diplomacy should strengthen. But Ukraine will not complain, and I'm here to state we have found a way to restore diplomacy. This is the goal I spoke about last year at the Shangri-La Dialogue, and now we can make it real. Dear friends, not so long ago, it seemed that the world would always be fragmented. But we saw the most nations truly desire and are capable of cooperation, at least as far as collective security is concerned. A clear example are the coalitions from military to humanitarian, formal and informal, which help us withstand the war and prevent Russia from expanding it. These coalitions supporting Ukraine unite countries from all countries with different characters and worldviews. What brought them together? Naturally, diplomacy. Diplomacy does work when it truly aims to protect life. Together with partners, we are defending life and rules-based world order. We are working to obtain air defense systems and co-produce weaponry and drones. And we train our soldiers together. And we counter cyber threats together. We restore energy infrastructure damaged by Russian terror together. Just on Sunday night, Ukraine faced another round of Russian strikes. Nearly, during one day, imagine, nearly 100 missiles and drones. So this has happened hundreds of times throughout the war. And no country could handle this alone. And I thank everyone in the world who helps us with air defense systems, saving lives to our people, and the best, of course, the best Patriot systems, the United States, Germany, Netherlands, other our partners who helped us. Thank you so much. Together we are also bringing back Ukrainian children who were deported to Russia from the occupied territories of our country. And we know for sure about 20,000 Ukrainian children who were kidnapped by Putin, kidnapped and taken to Russia. And we know their names. And Russia itself claimed that it took several hundred thousand of our children from the occupied territories of Ukraine. Only the worst criminals do such things. And we must bring all of our children back to Ukraine, to relatives, to parents. Thanks Qatar for the help, and other countries, other partners also. Together with our partners, we are bringing back our captured soldiers. There are already dozens such joint initiatives, and they work not only for Ukraine. Countries from Libya and Sudan, Bangladesh, consume food produced in Ukraine. All of them benefited directly when we lifted the Russian blockade of our ports and resumed our food exports. Initially, this was achieved through international mediation together with Turkey and United Nations. Later, when Russia left the grain initiative, we resumed our contribution to global food security, thanks to our soldiers who defeated Russia at sea. And already 50 million tons of cargo have been exported through our new maritime corridor. But this was also made possible by diplomacy that supports Ukraine's resilience in battles. Once again, diplomacy does work. Now we are creating a new security architecture for Ukraine based on bilateral security agreements with our partners. There are already 15 such agreements, and more will come. And these agreements are comprehensive, covering everything from defense cooperation to political and economic interaction. The diplomacy restored the world's habit of keeping with the terms of agreements in real life. Besides, we've proven that now diplomacy resolves issues that Europe has been unable to solve for decades. Specifically, we have secured real steps towards Ukraine's integration with the EU, and Ukraine will definitely become EU member, a part of one of the biggest global markets and security space. And the key point, of course, peace. Our experience of restoring effective diplomacy has led us to the format of the Global Peace Summit. We are convinced that our world wants to be united and be capable of acting in a complete harmony. We have realized that nations equally reject the idea of someone secretly making decisions and imposing them. What is needed is open and inclusive dialogue. We have confirmed that the principles and purposes of the UN Charter and international conventions are entirely relevant. All this has become the basis of our peace formula and has grown into the Global Peace Summit, so every leader and every country can show their commitment to peace. The global majority can ensure with their involvement that what is agreed upon is truly implemented, and so that Russia, who started this cruel war, cannot push us off the path to ending the war. More than 100 countries and international organizations have confirmed their participation in the summit for today. At the first summit, we will address 3 points of the peace formula: nuclear security, food security, and the release of prisoners of war. And of course, the Ukrainian children abducted by Russia. Time is running out, and the children are growing up in the Putin land, where they are taught to hate their homeland and are lied to, being told they have no families, while their loved ones wait for them at home in Ukraine. And after Peace Summit, when the global majority agrees on the common understandings and steps, the relevant parties will pass this to Russia, aiming for an outcome similar to the Grain Initiative. If these basic things are implemented, other points of the peace formula will work as well. Yes, we are disappointed that some world leaders have not yet confirmed their participation in the Peace Summit. Unfortunately, there are also attempts to disrupt the summit. We do not want to believe that this is a desire for monopolistic power in the world to deny the global community the opportunity to decide on war and peace, and to leave this power in the hands of one or two. We respect the UN Charter, respect every nation, and treat everyone equally. Only on this principle can the world be safeguarded from war. Ukraine proposed peace through diplomacy, an inclusive and fair former global peace summit, and I invite your region, your leaders, countries to join so that your peoples are involved in these global affairs, and by uniting against one war, we create for the world a real experience, the experience of overcoming any war and of diplomacy that does work. Thank you for an invitation. Thank you for your attention. Slava Ukraini. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Mr. President, thank you so much for that address to the 21st ISS Shangri-La Dialogue. We will have time for a few questions, and I want to start off, if I may, because you spoke about the path towards ending the war, and you spoke about the Global Peace Summit that is obviously a few weeks away now. What is the one thing, the most important thing you need at this stage from the international community as you pursue that path towards ending the war?
Дякую вам. Ще раз дуже дякую вам за запрошення і за це запитання. Ви знаєте, я вважаю, що на сьогодні головне світ, цивілізований світ вже зробив. Він не дав захопити Україну.
It did not allow for the seizure of Ukraine. Alongside with our warriors, with our people, you know that in the first days of and weeks and months of the war, it was very difficult.
просто дуже важко.
It was simply very difficult.
І міцність
And
нашого
the resilience of our
саме ця
nation,
міць, вона дала сили
resilience
воїнам. А об'єднаний світ дав
provided strength
впевненість,
to
що
our warriors.
Україна,
And the united
вона
world
не наодинці
ensured
проти агресора, який
that
порушує
Ukraine is not alone
міжнародне
against the
право.
aggressor that
Питання в
violates
назві
international law.
держави,
The issue
питання
is not with the name of the
не
country.
в імені
The question is
загарбника,
not
який
about
сьогодні очолює
naming the
Російську
aggressor
Федерацію.
that now leads
Питання
Russian Federation. The issue
принципу
is
поваги
about
до людей, до
principles,
людського
the
життя,
principles of respect
до
to human
свободи,
life, to
до свободи
freedom,
слова,
to the freedom of
до волі
speech,
обрати своє
to
життя
the
і мати
will
право
to choose one's own
жити.
life and to
І
have
мені
the right
здається,
to live.
що
And
все
it seems to
це
me
було
that
порушено
all
однією
this was
людиною,
violated
Путіним.
by one single person, Putin.
І дуже важливо, що
And
в
it is of utmost
найскладніший момент
importance that
світ,
in the most difficult
наскільки міг,
moment, the world,
хтось сильно, хтось
as
не
it
дуже,
could,
хтось
somebody more, somebody
зброєю,
less, somebody
хтось
with weapons,
дипломатично, у когось
somebody
немає зброї,
diplomatically,
хтось
someone
гуманітарно.
doesn't have
А
weapons,
хтось,
so
ви знаєте,
help
дуже
in
маленька
humanitarian
країна, у
way.
якій немає
And somebody is a
ніякого
very,
бюджету,
very
нічого
small
не
country
було, вони
that
віддавали
has no budget,
останні
and
свої
they
гроші,
were
просто
given the
щоб
very last money
показати,
they
що
had,
вони
simply
на
to
правильній
demonstrate that
стороні,
they are on
що
the
вони
right side,
на боці правди.
that they are on the side
І
of
мені
truth.
здається, що це найголовніше,
And
що
it seems
зробив
to me
світ.
that is the
Сьогодні
most
Росія
important thing that the world has
пробує
done. Now
зірвати
Russia is
саміт.
trying to disrupt the
І це
peace
правда.
summit, and
У
that
нас
is
є
true.
на сьогодні підтвердження
That is true. We have,
106
as of
країн
now,
світу.
the confirmation from 106
І це
countries
на
of the
високому
world,
рівні, на рівні
on the,
лідерів, високого
on the
рівня
senior
представників своїх
level
держав.
of high
106 країн.
representatives, on the level of leaders,
Що робить Росія?
106
Це
countries. And
країна
what
війни.
Russia is
І
doing,
вона
it is the
робить,
country of
вона
war.
сьогодні
And it is
їздить
now
по багатьох країнах світу,
traveling around many countries
погрожуючи
in the world,
блокадою
threatening them
харчової
with the
продукції,
blockade
агропродукції
of
або
the
хімії,
agricultural
або
goods, of the food
погрожуючи, що
products,
буде
of
демпінгувати
chemical,
ціни на енергетику,
It's
просто
threatening to damp
тисне
the prices
на інші
for
держави
the
світу,
energy,
що
and it
вони
is simply
не
pushing
були
the
на
other
саміті.
countries of the world
Питання
so
навіть
that
не
they
про
are not
зброю, не
present
про
on the
підтримку.
summit.
Це питання
This issue is not even about weaponry
підтримку
support.
просто закінчення війни,
This is
підтримку
about the
миру.
support
І вона
of the very
зриває
end
це
of the
і
war,
робить.
and it is
Працює в усіх регіонах.
disrupting it and is
І
doing
на
it in
сьогодні
all
є не
regions.
дуже гарна інформація,
And
скажу
now
вам відверто, що
there is some not
деякі
good
держави
information that certain states
почали їй допомагати в цьому,
have
в
started to
дипломатичному
assist
зриві
in
саміту.
diplomatic disruption of
І тому,
the
коли ви
peace
запитуєте,
summit.
що
And
може
therefore,
зробити
when you're
сьогодні
asking
світ,
what
світ
the
повинен
world
бути
can do,
міцним,
the world has to be
тиснути
resilient.
політично на Росію,
Has to be strong, has to
по-іншому зупинити
pressure on
Путіна
Russia.
неможливо, тільки
There is no other
дипломатична
way to stop
ізоляція,
Putin. Only
сильна
diplomatic
українська
isolation,
армія,
strong
ну і
Ukrainian
розібратися
military, and
всім країнам
to
світу до кінця, не балансувати між
for
Україною і
all the
Росією,
countries
а
of the world
захищати справедливість і
to
міжнародне
not
право.
balance between Ukraine and Russia, but defend international justice and law.
Thank you very much. We have time to take a few questions from the floor. We will take them one by one. So I can already say we won't get through all the list that we have here on my screen. But I want to give President Zelensky a chance to answer each question that is posed to him. I'll start with a question from the region here, from Cambodia. Ned Chantima, please. Your microphone is live.
Thank you for the floor. President Zelensky, you remarked before that Israel's right to defense is indisputable, as the right to self-defense is codified under the UN Charter. Meanwhile, you and your Western allies have also repeatedly referred to the rule of law when conducting relations and responding to hostilities internally and in the international community. As such, don't you think there should be a collective call from yourself and your allies to call upon the Israeli government to adhere to international humanitarian law, namely the principle of proportionality, the distinction between combatants and civilians, and the prohibition of inflicting unnecessary suffering on the civilian Palestinian population? Thank you.
Дякую вам дуже.
Thank you so much.
Передусім,
First and foremost,
як боротись з будь-якими
how
наративами і
to counter
дезінформацією.
any narratives and
Розбирати
disinformation.
кожен факт окремо, дивитись на деталі, дивитись правді в очі. Можна запитати і поставити таке питання, як зараз ви поставили, і об'єднати всі процеси, всі дати різних атак Хамасу на Ізраїль і потім тиск Ізраїлю в Газі. А можна розібрати. Україна – справедлива країна, яка поважає міжнародне право і статут ООН. Україна сказала, якщо терористи з Хамасу, це було в перший день атак на цивільне населення Ізраїлю, якщо терористи Хамасу атакують цивільне населення, Ізраїль має право захищати. Тому давайте все не змішувати в одне питання. А після цього Україна сказала, коли Ізраїль був на території Гази і була гуманітарна криза, Україна сказала, перше, готова допомагати гуманітарно Газі. Друге, що треба поважати міжнародне право. Третє, Україна визнає дві держави, і Ізраїль, і Палестину, і зробить все, щоб Ізраїль зупинився, щоб закінчився цей конфлікт і щоб цивільні люди не страждали. Тому не плутайте, будь ласка, два періоди і не змішуйте їх в один. Дякую.
Thank you very much. I will next ask the Executive Chairman of the ISS from the UK, Sir John Chipman.
Mr. President, one of the principles of international law is that if one country illegally invades another country, they are liable to pay compensation and reparations for the loss of property and persons. When, after Iraq invaded Kuwait in 1990, the war ended with Saddam Hussein retreating to Baghdad, a UN compensation committee did disperse elements of Iraq's state assets to compensate Kuwait. There is a legal argument that Russia's state assets could similarly be used. Will this issue be discussed at your peace conference?
Питання справедливості, частина з якої це є заморожені активи Росії і компенсація, всього того, що принесла Росія війною на територію України. Саме це питання може обговорюватися, хоча цього питання не буде в ком'юніке. Ще раз підкреслюю, що буде на цьому саміті обговорювати три питання: food security, nuclear security, and getting back deported stolen Ukrainian children. Це три головні питання. Безумовно, питання щодо заморожених активів, воно постійно обговорюється нашими партнерами. Безумовно, я вважаю, що Росія повинна відчувати, що ця війна дороговартісна. Але дороговартісна не для нас тільки, не для європейського континенту, не для Африки, Азії через блокування Чорного моря і харчової продукції, а через те, що вони є агресорами. Для цього потрібно, щоб ми могли можливість, нам надали можливість, так буде правильніше сказати, що нам надали можливість механізмом, спеціальним механізмом використовувати заморожені активи. На сьогодні тільки в Європі їх біля 300 мільярдів доларів. Цього не вистачить покрити все, що накоїла Росія на території України. Але якщо заморожені активи будуть не тільки заморожені в юрисдикції Європейського Союзу, а будуть використані в Україні одразу близьке коло Путіна, і він будуть відчувати, що ця війна дорогова.
Thank you very much. We have a very long list, but we're running out of time. So I'll ask for one more question that I'll ask President Zelensky to address, and I'll give the floor to Vela Nouns, please.
Thank you, Bastian. President Zelensky, with a view to the Global Peace Summit to be convened in Switzerland in 2 weeks' time, what would you hope for from this region, from countries in this region? And perhaps to Minister Ung, how might Singapore be able to support this process? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vela. If I may ask President Zelensky to address that question, then I'll give the word to Minister Ung to speak for the host nation, Mr. President.
Firstly, it is of great pleasure for me to be in Singapore, and I'm very pleased that me and my team were invited today. I will have the meeting with the President and Prime Minister of Singapore. We will discuss in details our bilateral relations, but the most important thing, I would really want the leader of Singapore to support Ukraine with his personal participation in the peace summit. And the same goes about the countries in the region. We truly count that you will support this summit. You will be present in Switzerland. We have on the agenda three points, but yet again I underscore, we are very open, normal people, and this was previously discussed with the Swiss side. We are ready to hear various proposals and thoughts that lead us not to continuation of the war, this is important, but to the end of it, and to sustainable and just peace for Ukraine.
Thank you very much.
Дуже дякую.
Dr. Ong, has Singapore decided how it will be involved in this process?
Well, first let me just thank President Zelensky for being here, express my personal admiration. 2 years ago, this is not your first address to Shangri-La Dialogue. If all of us remember, 2 years ago you addressed us. We're not sure we were here, but we weren't sure where you were, and it was a particularly dark period because we were coming out of COVID. And I would say that all the audience here listened with rapt attention, and we knew that we were part of history in the making, and deep admiration for your leadership, as well as the resilience of the people in Ukraine. So, sir, you have our admiration, and thank you for your leadership.
Thanks so much.
Singapore strongly supports the Ukraine position in principle and in practice. If you remember, the invasion was in February 2022, who can forget, 24 February. Very soon after, I think 4 days after, Singapore's Foreign Affairs Minister put out a statement on behalf of the Singapore government, wholly condemning the the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And unilaterally, we began sanctions against Russian banks and other entities that we thought could facilitate or aid in the conduct of war of Russia against Ukraine. We co-sponsored a UNGR resolution condemning the invasion and asking for the immediate withdrawal of Russian troops. We sent some aid, and I've been in contact with your defense ministers. I think we sent some ambulances, which I'm glad you've received, military ambulances. But we stand with you, and I think your appearance in this Shangri-La dialogue, President Zelensky, is the epitome of what we are all hoping for. Rule-based order, one which guarantees the security and survival of large nations and small. And I think I speak on behalf of us that we hope that your struggles will continue to bear victory, and we hope that significant progress, and we wish for your personal safety and the well-being of the people of Ukraine. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. President Zelensky, let me thank you on behalf of the ISS for speaking to the ISS Shangri-La Dialogue and answering questions from the delegates. Your mission is clear and of vital importance for your country, but as you have explained, also for global peace and questions that touch all of us, including in this region. I hope you will receive the diplomatic engagement you called for, and indeed that the voices of the Asia-Pacific region are heard, and to contribute to the aims of the Global Peace Summit in Switzerland. We have now reached the conclusion of the Shangri-La Dialogue, and I want to just very briefly thank the team that Vele Nouwens has led here at the ISS Asia office. Her team has worked tirelessly on the many challenges, logistical, content-wise, that an undertaking like this creates. Staff from our offices in London, Berlin, Manama, Washington have deployed to Singapore in support of this effort to make sure that we can convene in a setting that includes wide international participation and runs seamlessly for all of us. We had here some 581 full delegates. We batched in some 3,000 people altogether. We personally, well, not me personally, but the ISS facilitated some 91 bilaterals. We know there were many more because obviously nations make their own arrangements. We had 55 nationalities here, 50 government delegations, and then through 3 international organizations. On top of that, in terms of outreach, before we started the session, we had already on social media reached some 48 million people around the world. I dare to say this will be more now. We had over 350 media representatives here from around the world. And it's of course also my honor to thank the staff of the Prime Minister's office here in Singapore, the Ministry of Defense of Singapore, the Minister himself, of course, the Permanent Secretary, who I've seen here in the room before, and his team, of course also the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the police, and the many security officials who have kept us safe and were involved here. This was my first Shangri-La Dialogue as Director General and Chief Executive of the ISS. I dare say that I am looking forward to the next one, which will be at the end of May, early June in 2025. Of course, the ISS never stands still in the pursuit of defense diplomatic engagement, and I'm delighted to announce that some 2 weeks ago we signed an agreement with the government of the Czech Republic to organize and run the Prague Defense Summit that will focus on the defense capacity and defense capability challenges that need to be tackled to defend Europe. And I would like to acknowledge Daniel Blaškovič, the Deputy Minister of Defense of the Czech Republic, who has participated in the Shangri-La Dialogue this year, and we're looking forward to working with his government, and I hope to see some of you in Prague from November 8 to 10 this year for the first edition of that Prague Summit. And with that, I shall close, and I invite you now to have lunch. I wish you a safe journey. If I can just ask the audience to remain in their seats for 20 seconds while President Zelensky and the other speakers take their leave. Thank you very much. Have a good day.